My name is Captain Mark Ellison. I'm 45 years old and I've spent the last 23 of those years in the United States Army. I don't have medals on every wall or some viral story about heroics. I've served quietly, consistently, and without needing anyone to clap for it. I never cared much for politics, small talk, or making friends with people who only show up when it's convenient. I lead a logistics unit and I run it like a machine. My job isn't flashy, but it keeps people alive and I take that seriously. The folks under my command know what they're getting with me. I won't sugarcoat anything, but I'll have your back when it counts. Most of them respect me not because I talk loud, but because I show up, get it done, and leave the drama outside the gates. I'm not the kind of officer who needs to make noise to prove my worth. You won't find me giving speeches or playing golf with generals. I believe in systems and structure, in showing up early and leaving last if that's what the mission needs. People call me rigid sometimes, cold even, but that's only if they don't know what it means to carry the weight of others and still stand straight when it all goes sideways. My father was a mechanic, my mother a nurse. They taught me early that hard work speaks louder than any rank ever could. That stuck with me. So when I earned my bars, I did it for them and for every guy out there who works twice as hard without needing to be seen. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, buried regrets, and seen more than I care to share. But through all of it, I never forgot why I serve. Not for power, not for praise. For purpose, for discipline, for the people who rely on someone like me to not mess it up. So that's me. Captain Mark Ellison. Quiet, consistent, and about to face the one assignment I never saw coming. Lieutenant Aaron Pierce showed up to our base like he was stepping onto a movie set. 25 minutes late to his own welcome briefing, aviators still on uniform, too crisp to have seen a real day's work. He didn't salute, didn't introduce himself properly, just looked around the room like he already owned the place. We'd all heard whispers before he arrived. Son of Major General Henry Pierce, the kind of name that opens doors before anyone even asks what's behind them. And it didn't take long to see that Aaron knew exactly how much weight his last name carried. He strolled into the operations room, sat in the first chair he saw mine, and started flipping through the day's log like he was doing someone a favor just by showing up. No context, no questions. Just opinions fired off with that smooth, smug tone of someone who's never had to deal with consequences. He started every sentence with "I think" and ended it with "as if that settles it." Suggestions weren't really suggestions with him. They were demands disguised as innovation, and he threw them around like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. The team gave him the benefit of the doubt at first. You always do, even when it feels wrong. But it didn't take long for that patience to turn into discomfort. He scrapped a logistics chain that had taken us 3 years to perfect because he wanted to test out a new software tool his cousin had designed. When I pushed back, pointing out supply delays and chain of command concerns, he smiled like I was some outdated relic. Said we needed to modernize. There was no consulting, no listening. Just Pierce wandering through our systems, throwing around buzzwords and tech terms like he understood the mission. When mistakes happened, and they did, he blamed them on lack of adaptation. Translation people like me. I watched good soldiers, sharp thinkers, fall quiet around him. They stopped offering input, afraid their disagreement would come back to bite them. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. His arrogance wasn't just loud. It was dangerous. He once rerouted a medical shipment to the wrong sector entirely because he didn't double-check the zone map. That convoy ended up stalled in flood terrain. Could have cost lives. When I called it out in the debrief, he didn't apologize. Just blinked, shrugged, and said noted like we were at some strategy game night, not dealing with human consequences. But the worst part wasn't his incompetence. It was the way people tiptoed around it. Every eye in the room saw what was happening. Everyone felt the shift, but no one said a word, because they knew who his father was. You could feel it in the air, that quiet calculation people make when they weigh their values against their careers. No one wanted to be the one who went up against a general's son. And Pierce, he fed off that silence, started pushing further, slowly claiming responsibilities that weren't his, making decisions without running them through the proper channels, putting his name on reports he barely skimmed. He'd stand next to me during unit updates, nodding like he'd led the effort, when the reality was, he hadn't even checked the numbers. He loved the spotlight but never stayed long enough to clean up the mess behind it. I've served with leaders who inspired loyalty. Pierce inspired caution. He made good people second-guess themselves. He made me start keeping records. Not because I wanted to take him down, but because I knew eventually someone like him would trip over their own ego. And when that happened, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. It started during a routine logistics briefing. We were prepping for a supply convoy headed to Echo Post, about 30 miles south of the base. Lieutenant Pierce strolled in late as usual and pulled out a route map that didn't come from our system. He pointed at a shortcut that ran through Sector Delta, claiming it would shave off 2 hours of travel. I looked at the map once and knew it was a disaster waiting to happen. That path cut straight through terrain we hadn't cleared an old minefield flagged during a survey, but never fully decommissioned. I told him flatly the route was off limits. His smile didn't even twitch. He leaned on the table and said something about calculated risks and trusting the data. I didn't argue. I just walked out of the room and made a quiet call to reroute the convoy myself. I used my clearance to send a new operations log directly to the convoy chief, bypassing Pierce entirely. The supplies would take longer to arrive, but they'd get there in one piece. That decision saved lives. I didn't need applause for it, but I wasn't going to let some arrogant lieutenant turn our unit into collateral damage. Pierce found out the next morning. He came into my office, slammed the folder on my desk and demanded an explanation. I kept my voice steady. I told him the original route would have put 3 Humvees and a medical support vehicle at risk. That was it. No drama. Just facts. He didn't like that. Said I overstepped. Said I undermined him. I looked him dead in the eye and told him I protected the mission. He didn't say another word. Just stormed out muttering something under his breath about insubordination. But I knew then that this wasn't just about a bad call. It was about control. Pierce wanted loyalty, not logic. He wanted to be the smartest guy in the room, even if that meant ignoring warnings that could kill his own men. That day, something shifted, not just in how he saw me, but how I saw him. I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. I started seeing him for what he was, a threat, wrapped in rank and privilege. And from that moment on, I knew I couldn't let my guard down again. The week after I rerouted the convoy, things got quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, but the kind where eyes avoid yours in the hallway. Where conversations stop when you enter the room and start again, just as you leave. It wasn't long before I realized Pierce had started whispering things behind closed doors. He called me difficult, said I was stuck in my ways. He told junior officers I was resistant to change and a drag on the unit's progress. At first, I didn't care. I've been through worse. But when soldiers I'd mentored for years started pulling away, offering tight nods instead of real conversations, it hit different. I'd built this unit like a family, and now it felt like someone had slipped poison in the water. Meetings became a stage. Pierce spoke louder, smiled more, and gave shallow praise to those who nodded the fastest. I spoke less, observed more. The atmosphere shifted. You could feel the weight of forced agreement, like everyone was walking a tightrope above something sharp. The younger guys especially fell in line fast. I don't blame them. It's hard to push back when your career's just starting and the guy calling the shots has a general for a father. They weren't being weak. They were surviving. I started noticing little things. Reports I wasn't copied on. Decisions made without consulting me, even though I was still technically in charge. One morning I found a transport log altered after I signed it. Not enough to cause damage, but enough to make me look sloppy. I didn't react. I just noted it down, quietly, precisely. I wasn't going to give Pierce a scene he could twist into some power play. But inside, I knew I was being boxed out. It wasn't just about the convoy anymore. It was bigger, more calculated. Pierce wasn't just trying to discredit me. He was building a case to erase me, and no one seemed willing to stop him. There were moments I sat alone in my office and wondered how it had come to this. How a man who did his job and played by the rules became the problem. But I didn't spiral. I've seen darker days. I've been tested harder. This wasn't defeat. It was warning, and I heard it loud and clear. I didn't complain. I didn't beg. I just started preparing, not for revenge, for the truth, for whatever storm Pierce thought I wouldn't see coming. It started with an email flagged urgent. Mandatory one-on-one morale check-ins scheduled across the week run by base HR. No transcripts, no documentation, just a friendly conversation about workplace satisfaction. It felt off from the jump. These kinds of reviews weren't common, and when they did happen, they usually involved a paper trail. This time, everything was verbal, casual, intentionally vague. Soldiers came back from those sessions with a strange look in their eyes, like they were trying to figure out if they'd just been interviewed or interrogated. One junior tech carter pulled me aside and asked if being too honest could be held against him. I told him to speak carefully, but inside my own warning bells were going off. HR wasn't acting alone. I started noticing Melinda from HR spending more time in Pierce's orbit, sharing inside jokes, their conversations too casual for rank. They looked like co-conspirators rehearsing a script. None of this was accidental. HR doesn't suddenly take an interest in team morale unless someone files a concern. And given the recent tension, I had a feeling that concern had my name on it. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I nodded, smiled, and asked no questions. But I started tracking everything. Times, names, patterns in who got called in and when. I created a file, offline, encrypted out of reach from base systems. Every meeting, every shift in tone, every vague mention of leadership challenges or workplace pressure, it all went into that file. I didn't know what Pierce was planning, but I knew he wasn't doing it alone. The setup was slow, deliberate, and it wasn't about correcting behavior. It was about building a case, one word at a time, one distorted version of truth after another. I wasn't just being watched. I was being cornered, and whoever was pulling the strings wanted to make sure there was no way out once the trap closed. They called it a leadership alignment session, but the moment I stepped into that room, I knew what it was. Melinda from HR sat on one end of the table, arms folded, her face calm but unreadable. Pierce leaned back in his chair, confident, rehearsed, like this was the scene he'd been building toward all along. They didn't waste time. Melinda led with a soft voice, said they'd received concerns about my leadership style, that some junior officers felt intimidated, that I created an environment of pressure and resistance. Pierce chimed in next, masking arrogance with foul concern. He said my constant pushback hurt team morale, that I was becoming a barrier to progress. Every word was a brick in the wall they were trying to build around me. I listened without interrupting. Let them lay it all out. Let them believe they were in control. My chest was tight, not from fear but from something deeper, a quiet sense of betrayal that sat like a stone behind my ribs. When they finally paused, waiting for me to defend myself, I didn't take the bait. I kept my tone, even my hands still on the table. Then I asked one question. Are you saying that correcting a route that would have sent soldiers into a minefield is considered harassment? The silence hit like a dropped weapon. Neither of them answered. Melinda's eyes flicked away. Pierce sat frozen, the corner of his mouth twitching, unsure whether to smirk or stay still. I stood slowly, letting the moment stretch. Told them I had nothing more to add. If defending lives made me a liability, Then they needed to take a long look at their definition of leadership. Then I walked out. Calm. Whole. Not broken. But, with every step I knew, something in that room had cracked. And it wasn't me. After that meeting, I stopped trying to fix things out in the open. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just went quiet. But my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Every strange directive Pierce sent I saved. Every Slack message where his tone slipped, where the arrogance bled through his words, I archived. He didn't realize how careless he was with digital footprints. People like him never do. Then came the files. One afternoon, he forwarded a weekly logistics brief to the wrong distro list. Buried at the bottom was an attachment he clearly didn't mean to share. It was a red-marked HR draft notes about pending concerns, including my name and an outline of recommended exit strategies. I didn't react. I copied it to a secure drive and deleted the trace. Then I started writing things down. Short observations, names, dates. Not rumors. Just facts, patterns, changes in behavior. Who stopped looking me in the eye. Who repeated phrases I knew came from Pierce's mouth. I didn't need a grand reveal. I just needed the right stack of moments. And I was patient. No one suspected me of building a case. Not even HR. They thought I was drifting out, burnt out, isolated. But I wasn't retreating. I was recording. Every passive-aggressive remark from Pierce in team huddles. Every document request that somehow bypassed my inbox. I kept it all. I had a copy of Clause 19.3 from the base conduct policy pinned to the inside of my locker. It spelled out clear lines of accountability in cases involving abuse of influence. Nobody else seemed to read those rules. But I did. Twice. I started using secure off-base storage. Encrypted drives, time-stamped logs. No one knew. I didn't talk. I didn't vent. I let them believe I was outnumbered and worn down. But deep inside I was drawing a line. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was truth. And when the time came, I wanted it to speak for itself. Not through anger. Not through drama. But through undeniable evidence. Because I knew what they were doing. And I knew they thought no one was watching. But I was. I was always watching. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No alarms. Just a quiet upload through a secure portal that most officers didn't even know existed. I attached the file, tagged the right channel, and walked away. I knew I wouldn't need to say a word. The file was a copy of a logistics memo Pierce had leaked. Not just to the wrong person, but to an open, unclassified group chat. It included troop schedules, site coordinates, and disciplinary notes. All stamped confidential. No redactions. No password. Just sitting there visible to anyone who scrolled up far enough. I'd already saved screenshots, metadata timestamps. But it wasn't just the breach that mattered. It was who made it. And what his last name meant. Pierce wasn't just another incompetent officer. He was the son of a 2-star general. His entire career had been carried on someone else's shoulders. And now that name was going to bring him down. Clause 12.4.7. That wasn't a line in a manual. It was a grenade with the pin already pulled. I remembered the day we pushed it through. A rare ethics amendment for officers with direct family ties in the chain of command. It outlined shared liability in cases involving data exposure or abuse of influence. No exceptions. No loopholes. The clause had sat in the handbook for 3 years, ignored by most. But I knew every line of it. Because I wrote half of it. And Pierce, he'd just handed me a textbook violation. But here's the part no one saw coming. Melinda had signed off on his clearance paperwork. She'd approved his data access level. That linked her name directly to the breach. And according to Clause 12.4, 7, failure to monitor or restrict privileged access made her equally responsible. So when I hit send, it wasn't just Pierce's career on the line. It was hers. And everyone who tried to bury me under vague complaints and morale surveys. The report moved fast. Legal took one look and escalated it up the ladder. Within 24 hours, a full internal audit was launched. Within 48, Pierce's access was revoked, his badge pulled, and his desk emptied without ceremony. Melinda didn't come into work the next day. Her out-of-office reply just said indefinite leave. No one asked questions, but everyone knew. The whisper around base wasn't about me or my file. It was about the clause. The one they all ignored. The one that had been sitting there waiting. And in the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream. I let the policy speak. And it spoke louder than anything they ever tried to use against me. That clause didn't just expose their mistake. It burned the whole scheme down. The response came faster than I expected. Pierce was reassigned to a remote logistics outpost before the week ended. Not a demotion, but everyone knew what it meant. HR leadership was placed on an immediate suspension pending a formal inquiry. The base morale team was dissolved and a new oversight unit moved in. No announcements were made. Just a quiet reshuffling of chairs and locked offices. The kind of changes that spoke louder than press releases ever could. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I simply submitted my resignation letter with a single line at the bottom. No settlement. No pension negotiations. I declined every offer with a thank you and a firm no. Because I didn't stay to win something. I stayed to fix something. And now that it was in motion, I didn't need to stick around to see the credits roll. My team understood. They didn't ask for speeches. A few nodded as I passed by. One junior officer gave me a quiet thumbs up. That was enough. I walked out past the flagpole, past the posters about honor and integrity, and didn't look back. The system didn't apologize. It never does. But it did change. And that was the whole point. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't always look like a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's just a rule enforced, a door closed, a silence that finally makes space for the truth. I didn't leave angry. I left at peace, because I knew the next man wouldn't face what I did, and that was all I ever wanted. As I stepped through the main gate, one last time, the sun caught the corner of a faded poster by the checkpoint. Honor, respect, integrity, words I used to believe in without question. I still do, but now I understand they don't come from slogans on walls. They come from what you do when no one's watching. I didn't burn the system. I just showed it the match it had already lit. I didn't raise my voice, throw punches, or demand retribution. I waited, I listened, and when the moment came, I made it impossible for them to look away. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just knowing the rules better than the ones trying to twist them. Sometimes it's walking away on your own terms with nothing but your name and your word intact. That was enough for me. Always has been.